Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we have a great one for you. I'm sorry it's a day late, but it is still a great couple of stories for you. Today we have another couple on. We actually have Ali and Jeff Werning. This is a funny one. This is actually somebody that my mother introduced me to. My mother has no hunting history or background or anything, but she was a school teacher, and Ali is one of her students. They stayed in contact, and I'm glad that they did because Ali and Jeff have amazing stories. So I'm not going to steal any of their thunder. I just want to say thank you to Ali and Jeff for coming on the podcast, taking the time to meet with me. Hopefully I get to meet them in person, buy them a beer or dinner or something in the future. But guys, I hope you enjoy their stories. Also, if you're listening to this, please share it with one person today so that we can get more people, more listeners, reaching out to me with some more crazy stories. So that's it, guys. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off and let Ali and Jeff tell you some of their hunting stories. Thank you. All right, guys. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How you doing?
Good.
Very good.
Good. Well, hey, I'm very excited to have you guys here. I mentioned it before we started recording, but weird world where we got introduced through my mother, who has literally zero ties to hunting, but she's a teacher, and she was your teacher, right?
She was my teacher for 3 years in high school of home ec and sewing and all things good.
That's right. She makes me call it consumer and family studies. But
yes.
Home ec is what it is.
It's what people understand it to be.
Yeah, she doesn't listen to all of them, but she'll probably listen to this one and she'll be like, "That's right, Michael. Get it right." So
get it right.
Right, exactly. All right. So let's kick this thing off. Beyond the fact that we were introduced by my mom, which is a weird thing to say on a hunting podcast, why don't we let you guys introduce yourselves, and so the people know who they're hearing some stories from tonight.
My name's Jeff Werning, Colorado native. We've been generationally here on the Front Range. Grew up kind of around the Greeley, Platteville, South Platte area, and grew up hunting geese and waterfowl as a kid. Starting when I was 5 with a cap gun in the goose pit, and then went on to big game hunting starting in 14, or when I was 14. And okay. Then Ali and I ended up meeting at Colorado State University. So our ties are up in Fort Collins, and it's been 13 years ago that we met, and we've been hunting as a couple since.
Yeah. And I'm Ali Werning, and I got my hunter safety in 2011. So I've been hunting a little over a decade, and 10 solid years of big game hunting. Like that, always kind of a husband and wife crew going hunting and fishing together, and finally found somebody that loves the outdoors and introduced me to everything like this. So
awesome.
I was pretty lucky.
Yeah. So Ali, so Jeff's been hunting his whole life, more or less. Did you pick it up because of Jeff? Is that what the timing is for that? Or was there some other catalyst that got you going?
I picked it up because of him. A funny thing, and this is where this is a bit of a small world, is in high school, your mom had us write a letter to ourselves in 3 years when we were about to graduate college. And one of the pieces that I did
I got to read them all.
Right. Read everybody.
I'm just kidding.
And I wrote a bucket list of, things I just in general in life, not that I'd expect to do in those 3 years, but one of the pieces on that list was catch a fish. And one of the pieces on that list was go hunting. So it started when I was just grew up in Colorado and being from this area and always being fascinated with it, but never really had the opportunity until I met Jeff, and he had duck decoys in the back of his truck the day we met. So it was a good sign.
So it's just something you kind of wanted to dabble in and never got around to until you met Jeff. That's cool. Yeah. That's awesome. I need to somehow convince my wife to just sit a blind with me or something, because she has no interest. For her, she loves that I'm a hunter.
Yeah.
But she has no interest in the death portion of it, and that's just too much for her, and I respect that. But I hope someday she's willing to come out and like sit, or maybe like a Western big game, hike with my bow.
Yep.
And we don't have to kill anything, but just like kind of enjoy the experience, and hopefully she'll fall in love with it too, because it's definitely for males and females. So.
Yeah.
So, Okay. Well, cool, guys. Well, nice to meet you. Nice to formally meet you. I guess we've texted it a little bit, but yeah, let's jump right into it. I know you guys have some stories for us. I don't know who wants to go first, Ali or Jeff. You guys can pick.
I guess the setup for this one, there's a property that we hunt down southeastern Colorado that's kind of got your deer, elk, sheep, kind of the whole smorgasbord of big game down there. And so forever I've been putting in for a Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep license.
And your uncle had shot a bighorn sheep down there
mid
30 years ago. Yeah,
mid 90s. He got his sheep down in the same area, and that's what turned us on to it. And so it's been neat. We've been privileged to get 4 or 5 really nice mule deer in the same vicinity. My dad, brother, Allie, myself, best friend Kurt. An area that we've managed to, have some success with elk. And so we're always looking at sheep down there, but it turns out that the access point to this unit ends up getting cut off when there's a change of ownership in a piece of property. And so I lost confidence in the idea that if I drew the tag at some point, you may not be able to actually go utilize it. So I decided to change and put in for a different unit. We live in Loveland, Colorado here. And so the Big Thompson Canyon headed up to Estes Park to Rocky Mountain National Park is just west of us. And so I put in for the archery only license for the first time last year. And
mind if I ask how many points you went in with? I know
I was really lucky.
3, and then you add
you
from
need
there.
3 to qualify, and that gets you into the weighted points in Colorado. And so your 4th year applying is your first year eligible. I know a lot of folks that are in their 20s of years that have not drawn, guys that get lucky and they get it right out the gate. But I was at 3 and then 8, or 3 and 5, so 8 total years of applying. And so I decided to go ahead and put in for this year.
That's pretty good.
And it was my birthday morning, April 19th is when the draw results came out. And I woke up and grabbed my phone and clicked on my emails, and I looked and woke her up and I said, am I actually reading this right? And I don't know, we checked it 3 or 4 times. I
texted it to everybody.
Sent pictures. Am I dumb?
Call Cardinal Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Are you sure I got this?
So yeah, we checked that thing, opened up the safe, looked at it multiple times to make sure that it actually said my name and had the unit and it was going to happen. So yeah, it really worked out good that all of a sudden I switched units and we were on for a December 1 bighorn sheep hunt.
That's awesome.
You're right next to,
I think there's 17 minutes away is where the canyon starts. So being able to scout as opposed to where it was 4.5 hours and then another half hour in, and then hoping that you can get through a gate. We went from that to let's just drive 20 minutes up the canyon and go take a look at bighorn.
That's not bad at all. That's
upgrade.
All right, cool.
So yeah, it was, so I work in Alaska. Over the summers, June and July, we have a business that we commercial fish out of Bristol Bay and gillnet sockeye salmon up there. So I had the plans once we got back in late July to start scouting and looking and start tuning in arrows and get everything good to go. And so we spent a whole lot of time going up the canyon and looking and not seeing a whole lot of sheep, but seasonally they come in a little bit later when the rut starts getting closer. So we had a whole lot of anticipation time. And I think a lot of the reason we picked this story to tell is really speaks to kind of the community that you run into. We ran into a guy that's now a really good friend that has been on countless of the sheep hunts up in this unit, helped a lot of hunters, has a lot of knowledge, and got to know him and his wife and become really good friends. And
we were at Shields one day, I think buying our new boots for this hunt and checking out, why are you buying the nice crispy boots? And we said, well, he's got a sheep license. And the guy behind us was an employee, and he goes, wait, you've got a sheep, you got to meet Tracy. And then his cousin did the same thing and goes, you got to meet this guy. He's the goat guy. He's the bighorn guy. And so we got it from 3 or 4 different directions of, you got to get in touch with this guy. And I mean, we just lucked out of having somebody that's, not only knowledgeable, but super friendly and wanted to be, he goes, I want to be as involved in the hunt as you're interested in. And he wanted to help scout
awesome.
and pack and guide if it was needed, and if not, just come as a buddy. And so that ended up being a really lucky thing that we got in touch with this guy.
That's too cool. I've heard in general those like once in a lifetime hunts that Colorado has. When you draw one, people come out of the woodworks to help. Yeah. Which is not the case with elk or mule deer or those things. Just this is the way the draw works. They're like, everyone wants you to be successful. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to work with you. I think you guys found maybe someone even better than that who has like the skills and expertise and knowledge. But I haven't experienced that. Someday,
right?
I'll have the points. If it takes 8, I'll be pretty damn happy. But we'll see. But that's super cool that you guys just in a checkout line. Yeah. And for those that don't know, Shields is like what Bass Pro wishes it was. It's the coolest store.
Yeah, a big plug for Shields. Not an app.
Yeah, my wife and I, we went there the first time with our kids, and we were like, this is amazing. They got a giant Ferris wheel in there. And we're like, we should come here on a date night and not bring our children. Just leave them at home so that we can actually enjoy the store, because it's awesome. Besides the point, we'll go back to the sheep hunt. Continue, man. Sorry.
So that said, I got super excited come August, and went up a couple times to take a look around, and we saw some rams and started to kind of really get excited about it. And I think that, as you mentioned, the folks that come out of the woodwork, each time that you go up on these hunts, some of them you hike into places to glass from, some of them you can kind of see them from the highway and the river system. But every time it seems like you do run into somebody that, whether it's a wildlife photographer or somebody that held the license in the past, it turned out to be a really neat unit to hunt, because it's not one of those where it's a solitary kind of hunt. You have to hide your spot, or, it really did become a community kind of thing. And I think that that's awesome. Kind of the theme of it. So we met a really neat wildlife photographer named Fred. He ended up, I think he probably, when it was all said and done, had 1,400 images of all the sheep through the canyon. So it really became, a thing of going up to watch sheep as much to talk to friends as much as it was to go keep tabs on things. So I guess to that point, we end up fast forward that season.
Well, real quick, this was also part of this was you had a bow. This is an archery license. You had a bow, but had never shot a big game animal with a bow before. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess, we kind of skipped that part, that I decided that my first big game archery hunt should just might as well be a bighorn sheep.
Yeah, no big deal.
Grew up with bows shooting. We would hunt geese with them and small game. So, shot quite a bit growing up. But yeah, I've always been a rifle hunter, and my cousin's been a big archery hunter his whole life, and we've been around it. But yeah, this is my first big game hunt with archery equipment.
So let me ask you, Jeff, did you deliberately put in for archery because you thought the odds were better, or like why are you like I'm going all in with archery on this ram, and that's where you're putting your draw in rather than
no? When I decided to change units for the draw and get away from the unit that I'd been putting in for in the past, I'd heard a couple different folks that have had great experiences in this unit. My cousin, a good friend of his, a game warden that we're friends with, had hunted this unit. And so over about 20 years, we knew a lot of people that had experience here. So it kind of had some history for past folks that we knew that had hunted it. And, this year I've got an archery deer tag. I kind of decided to transition a little bit into, trying to try something a little bit more challenging and different. And so now I just started my archery quest with a sheep, as opposed to, I suppose, graduating to
that. All right. Good answer. All right. Keep going.
So half of our scouting was going to the archery guy in Greeley and getting a new bow and getting arrows tuned in and finding the perfect broadhead. And I don't have a bow. I've never bow hunted. But I got to learn a lot and participate a lot in seeing what the guys were talking about. And I mean, I watched him shoot hundreds of arrows, and we've got about 50 yards from our couch in our living room through the sliding glass doors out through the yard to the backstop that we have a safe lane to shoot. So we've got a couple spots that he was getting 50 yards to be able to practice the long end of ranges. So that was pretty fun.
Up there in Loveland, you guys got a pretty sweet free course, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
On some, Lon Hagler, is that right?
Yeah, it's a great group of guys. It's the Big Thompson Bow Hunters Association. They maintain that course in partnership with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And so, yeah, it's a really good course over there. They hold a lot of different events, competition shoots. A lot of the guys in the industry around here are involved with maintaining and keeping that range going. So, a great group of guys to have met with that. Also over at Kodak, there's a really nice range over on the Poudre River that's built and maintained by, I think it's the city of Windsor that have that put together. So yeah, there's a lot of nice places to shoot around here, and short range, 3D, longer range, a lot of areas to practice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I guess kind of going forward, we got into mid-November, when the rut was really kicked in and all the rams came in and the ewes settled into a common spot. And so for 2 weeks before season open, we were up either morning, afternoon, or both, keeping an eye on sheep and kind of seeing what was showing up and which were the most likely candidates that we wanted to take a look at. And I guess as hunting luck goes, they pretty much all found their way to private property for 7 to 10 days before opening day. And so we spent an awful lot of time watching them work further and further away from national forest land and kind of wondering how it was going to work out. And again, back to friend Tracy that we met, he says, eventually, don't worry about it. They'll cycle around. But, you kind of start getting a little bit nervous about, all of a sudden, all of the rams that you've been watching are no longer accessible. But, this being the archery only license, they issue 3 of them. And it's a full month. You get all of December to hunt. So, we weren't too concerned, but, for opening day, we kind of at least wanted to think that we were going to have an opportunity to get a hunt on without just watching them on the wrong side of things. So we ended up, I think I went up in the morning and afternoon,
the day before
season opened, and they were in a cliff complex that they hadn't been in, just crazy steep kind of stuff. And it took a while to find them. And we made a hike around the backside where we hadn't seen them and found a set of lion tracks that had headed in right where they'd been. And so, not knowing for sure.
Lion right through the snow too. So it's like pristine, like what a photographer would dream about finding.
So, the answer to why they got into the real steep stuff became pretty clear. Mm-hmm. And so, we had really no idea what was going to happen come opening day, but, we were excited that at least we kind of knew where they were, and they were edging back towards the areas that we were able to get in on. So, opening morning came, and we got a team of folks that were there with us. My cousin was there on glass. Tracy was there on glass, and we got there at sunrise and watched the sheep as the sun came up. And, if they were going to the right, as they had been for the last 10 days, they'd end up back over on private, around the mountain, and it was going to kind of be a done deal for the day. But the ewes ended up coming out of the cliff, and they started trailing up and left and in the right direction. So it all looked like we were going to have an opportunity on them, at least to get in and see if they made their way over to the right side of the mountain for us. And so I had to drop down off of the near side of the river ravine and throw on the waders, and it's all anchor ice and the water running through pockets, and with waders on and a rope around my waist to make sure he didn't slide under something. We made it across the river and threw hunting boots back on and started heading up the hill.
When we found the ewes, I think your cousin spotted them, and we had the spotting scope and then everybody on binoculars, and they were the things that those sheep can do. It is just baffling, because we're sitting there watching them and they're just jumping rock to rock on a sheer cliff face granite wall. And he's fixing to cross an icy river and climb up to go harvest one. And I'm just sitting there watching, like, I'm getting more and more nervous. Like, we've done some dumb, steep stuff before, but nothing where you're careening, hundreds of feet down into a river at the bottom, if something goes wrong. And so, I mean, it was just to watch, to be on the part of the watch side, not the active hunt side of it, was kind of insane. And I think when we figured out from our glass spot to where they were was only 700-800 yards.
Mm-hmm.
It was, but it's, straight down, straight across. And I think it took him
a
couple hours.
Yeah, it was a couple hours to get around to where we were kind of in position.
Yep.
So he's doing 10 feet at a time, and you're sitting there doing the math, looking at the river, looking at the mountain, and just like, I don't know about this.
When I told my cousin Gary, I said, I'm willing to do a lot, and this is a really neat license, but I kind of told him, I said, this part of this mountain, I don't want to get above it. Everything's worth it, but I said, that might be riskier than I want to get myself in the middle of. And, he smiled and nodded and said, no problem. And so I had, my glasses, and he was sitting at the bottom, spotting and giving signals and, giving good hand signals for which direction they were going versus where I was going. And so I was more paying attention to him and excited as I was climbing the thing. And I got up to where I kind of thought my elevation was right, and he keeps giving me more and more. And so I kept heading up the hill. And so at one point,
was it like scree, or was it big boulders, or what are the mountainsides look like?
It's basically you run out of the river. It's just a big vertical granite cliffside, and once you get up on top of it, then it rolls out to grass and such on top. It's still real steep, but it gets into more just a grassy terrain that the sheep go up and spend their day grazing and rutting up on top outside of the cliffs. But down, like Ali said, if you end up losing traction, it's a pretty not fun fall to the bottom. It's pretty quick. So
that's pretty shitty slide.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but when I got up to the top, I was more paying attention to where I thought I needed to go and hand signals and such. And pretty soon I looked down and I realized I'm exactly where I said that I didn't want to end up.
Don't look down at it.
Yeah. And so I pop up over a log and figured I had to be pretty close, and I end up spotting 3 ewes that are grazing up above me. So I was getting right in the middle of it, and the side that I was on, I had rocks kicking out of beneath my feet, and on some pretty steep stuff that I wanted to crown up over the top of. And so I ended up figuring where all the sheep were at. They were kind of in 2 different bunches, and I was able to range right there to start with. I was right at 67 yards from the ram that was the best in that band. And so after counting them in the morning, it was a big group, a lot of eyes. We were 34 or 37 ewes, and I think there were 6 rams in that group.
And last year there were what, 3 solid, like, if any one of these 3 walks in front of you, it's a no-brainer, like size wise and curl, and that we'd been scouting for so long. And like that had the photographer friend with his telescoping lens that he was able to get pictures from far and close, and we really were able to figure out the 3 choice critters that were the options.
And with only 3 licenses that were issued for the unit. We knew where the other guy was hunting. Kind of an interesting end of the story when you combine his hunt. But I'd seen him in the morning, and I just told him, I said, if we're going to be hunting on the same mountain, if one of us is on a stalk, let's just kind of, let's be good neighbors. If somebody's on a stalk, let's not get in a hurry. There's plenty of time, plenty of sheep. Let's, not ruin something and send them back onto private by getting into a rush. And so, he ended up being, good to talk to about that. And he says, I'm going to go up the west face of this mountain anyway. So he says, I don't even think we'll be near each other on the mountainside. But like Ali said, it was one of those that there was, a couple that were a little bit bigger. Obviously just blessed to be able to take a sheep was good enough. But there were 3 of them that it was pretty much a shot on any of those 3 was going to be a really good deal. So anyway, so I ended up, starting at 60 yards and had a log that was laying down in front, and then a couple of trees that were up above, and, a few spots that I could pick around and get a little bit closer, but they were not in a great spot to make a move. So I ended up pinned down for, I don't know, it's probably 30 or 40 minutes that I waited. And then they started to feed uphill, and I was able to skirt back around that log and come up to the west side of them, and got to a point where, I was right into about 40 yards, and I could see just the backs of sheep, and where they were going, it was going to end up that they were going to crest over the top and get into a spot that was a big flat. And so my chances were going to go way down on that one working. So I decided to make a move and kind of sneak around and come back a little bit further west and north of them. And, like Ali said, I practiced at longer ranges and can shoot out to, where guys are talking about shooting those really long ranges with bows. But, I really wanted to know that I'd be in, 20 to 40 yards was my ideal shot to make sure, on something like this, to be ethical and make a really good shot. And when it all came together, I was right at 30 yards and got an arrow knocked and thought that was all going to work out. And it ends up that there's another rock to where all I can see is the top 6 inches of backs. And
no.
So I thought, I managed to get to my target range. It all worked out. And in my mind, I'm like, you got to be kidding. I've got to get closer.
Yeah, it's got to be a little taller today.
So I got down and got to sneaking, and I look up and didn't realize that there were 3 ewes that had fed up a different direction. And I look up, and they're staring right at me. And so I'm in the point of I'm busted. Not exactly sure, if everybody saw me, but, they definitely were nervous and could tell that they knew something was there that wasn't supposed to be. So, I decided to try to get just a little bit more and get the elevation that I needed to think if when they move forward, if everything doesn't bust out, that it's really going to work. And so I made a move, crawled a little bit closer, and it ended up being that the ram that I was after was the first one to go ahead and step forward when they moved up. And the last time I ranged was 16 yards.
No way.
And so, it was right there, just perfect. And so I drew, and he stepped out in front and let the arrow go. And, I've been excited in my life, and a lot of things, especially I think when you watch friends and other people hunt, you get just as nervous as they do. But I was standing there, nobody with me, by myself, let the arrow go, and everybody takes off running. And I was shaken to the point that I barely could hold my bow. I ended up setting it down and, taking a second. And I looked down, and, it's at that point a half a mile down to where spotters and everybody's at. And I can see people staring at me, and I'm staring at them. And at that point, it's kind of one of those that you're excited. Did it work? They went up over the hill, so I didn't see him crash, and then all the, hopefully I got him. I know I got him. All that stuff goes in. And I was shaken to the point that I don't think I could have walked for about the first 5 minutes after the arrow went.
Well, and I think that was the thing for me. I was watching him climb that hill, watching the person that I love climb this thing that if he slips wrong, he's at the bottom of a river. And you know, so that was terrifying. So it's cold and early and all of those things also. So you're sitting in the snow and watching all of this. And so I just like, I gotta move. I gotta get up. I gotta turn around. I get, I don't know, 100 feet from where the guys are spotting him, and they see the ewes scatter, and I think he shot. I think he hit him, you know, and it was the same kind of assumptions from our side of the canyon going, did he hit? Is it good? Can we get his attention? Is he jumping up and down? You know, what's the deal? And try to find a white butt on the side of the hill. And I just heard that of they kind of, I think that they were glassing you and finally saw that it was like all good. And it's like, I don't get all that emotional with things like this, but it's like that was tears. And that was a moment of, okay, now is the find him and all of that, but the success just happened. And it was kind of unreal to be on that side of the hill, you know, so close but so far, to not be right next to him when most of our hunts are kind of hand in hand and with each other. And so that was something else of trying to figure out, you know, okay, well, now what's next?
So from my perspective, I could not see any of this. And so I looked down and I noticed that my cousin Gary is headed down and he's crossing the river and he's coming up. And, you know, as much as I wanted to just run right in and find out what happened, I saw he was coming up and I knew he had a advantage on the glasses that I didn't have. And so he came up and I took a break and realized by this point I had not drank any water or anything else. And so I took a break and grabbed a granola bar and a bottle of water and kind of let her all settle. And he came up and he said that it was actually Tracy's wife, Helen, was on the spotting scope, and she, amongst everybody, says there's a ram down. And so Gary came up and he says they saw him what looks like about 150 yards up and left. And I'd gone over and found a couple spots of blood right there where the shot was. So I knew that, you know, it felt good, looked good, and we had a blood trail. And so we started up and kind of heading around, and I looked, and I'll be darned, I see a ram, and he's walking real slow away. And I looked, and I could see blood on his right front leg. And so Gary and I talked about it, followed the blood trail, you know, confirmed that was all right. It was the right sheep. And so we got in, and he'd laid back down by the time we got around the hill, and expected that at that point that, you know, he looked like, you know, it was all said and done. And I thought I'm going to probably shoot another arrow just for insurance. And we got to 30 yards and he kind of tipped his head up. And so at that point, I went ahead and shot one more time, and he ended up making a turn. And it was the most amazing thing. If you were below and didn't know it was happening, it would have been the craziest thing to watch. But he ended up down this ravine and just cragged through the rocks, that he jumped airborne with all he had, and heard him take off, heard his hooves hit another rock, and then heard him crash. And he covered, I mean, more ground through the air than I realized that they're capable of. You know, just an amazing creature. No their way. Agility. Yeah. And so,
how far? If you give us like a estimate distance, I'm not going to hold.
No, he ended up, you know, from where he launched off that rock, he was about 50 yards downhill, and he touched the ground twice on his way down. And I mean, it was steep, just unreal. And Fred, the photographer we were talking to, we were looking at the rock from where he launched off of versus where he ended up. And, you know, some of it probably he slid a little bit too, but just you could see his hoof marks, you know, where he hit the rocks as he was headed down the hill, you know, before he expired. And it was just amazing, the agility of what they've got in them.
That's cool.
And so we got
cool
down
visual
there.
to have in your brain.
Yeah. He packed himself out.
Yeah.
You know,
he got closer.
He didn't go the other way.
You're like, the truck's this way, buddy.
Yeah.
So we got down to him and, confirmed everything was good. The first shot was actually good. It was a little bit back, but it was, double lung shot. He was kind of walking uphill and I shot him on a walk. And so it was just a couple inches back of where I wanted to be, but it was, first one would have been good, with a little more time. The second one was, no doubt really good. And, like I said, first archery hunt, but I got hooked up with the guys at Iron Will Broadheads, shooting their single bevel 125 grain arrow. And the second one, it was amazing. Not to be graphic, but the blood trail that broadhead produced was just an amazing thing. So it was neat shooting, stuff that you're confident in. And
that's cool. I shoot Iron Will as well. I don't have the single bevel, but I have the solid 125s. And, I killed an elk this year with it, and it was a complete pass through at like 40 yards, through some brush, just awesome. But it didn't bleed at all. Not a drop. Like, it was super weird. Even when it piled up, we found it about 150 yards away. It was dead within minutes.
Wow.
Like, it ran, and we didn't see this. We waited 2 hours, but it was upside down. So it ran out into the field, reared up as if it were going to, you think of the Bronco, right? The Denver Broncos, the horse on top of the stadium. He reared up like that and fell backwards and just dug his horns into the dirt.
Huh.
And so it died immediately, but it wasn't. There's no blood, so it was absolutely crazy. But
I've heard a few people say that they don't find a lot of blood trails, but they don't go very far.
Not go far.
I took a photo of the blood trail when this guy took off, and it was like a 6-8 inch wide red stripe. And like I said, when he jumped off the rocks, it looked like rain spots, and then a spot where he hit the rocks. It was pretty amazing, the blood trail that there was on that one. So
here's something funny that I just remembered. I had a recap of my hunt and I forgot this story, and I'm going to tell it for to be honest, right? So after the first day of hunting, we went through a lot of, or maybe second day of hunting, we went through a lot of brush. I was like, I need to shoot, make sure my sight's still on. And I go windy day, and I'm like, that's all right. I'm shooting at like 50 yards. Why? I don't know. I don't feel comfortable at 50, but I shoot and I just miss the target altogether. Just whiff it. And I just watch this arrow just tumble down. I'm shooting down a road, basically. I just watch my arrow tumble, walk down, get it, look at the arrow. It's still razor sharp. And I was like, oh, no way. And so that's the same arrow that I ended up killing my elk with. I shot my elk with no wind at 40 yards, but 50 yards with a lot of wind. I don't know what I was doing, but I whiffed it. And man, those broadheads are awesome.
Yeah.
They're so amazing that I just sent it down a dirt road and it still complete pass through on an elk.
Now you start adding up the cost of shafts and putting them together and inserts and broadheads, and it adds up. It's not a cheap kind of a thing, but when you figure you put that much work into scouting, planning, everything else that goes into a hunt,
plus the once in a lifetime license.
Yeah. I figured it's worth investing in the best thing that you can put out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I believe it. But I cut you off there. You were finishing the story before I ran off into an Iron Will tangent.
Oh, I guess at this point it's kind of just the hero and pack out part of it. But yeah, we got down there and got hands on him, and
Tracy climbed
up.
up.
At that point, Tracy was already climbing up, and I didn't realize he was coming up to help pack out. And I just hear, "Hey, sheep hunter," from around the corner. So it was a great moment. Hugs and high fives, and just it was a neat deal. Yeah, I mean, it only ended up being from sunrise until the arrow went off was 2.5 hours about. So total sheep hunt after all that. I couldn't be any luckier that first stalk, first day, everything came together. And so the three of us got him taken apart and came down the mountain. And by the time we came down, word was out, and it's right there close to home, like we said. So it was kind of a neat deal. And part of the reason that we picked this story is by the time we had him packed down, my mom, my dad, my brother, we had a couple other friends were up. The photographers were all there. So it was really neat. By the time we hit the road, just exhausted, tired, and huffing and puffing. But we had a lot of really important folks that got to share share in the end and the start of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we had while they were caping him, we were just on the spotting scope, watching from the roadside, because there wasn't, there's no reason to send more than just having 3 guys on the side of the hill to bring the sheep down. And we had a couple in a Subaru headed up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and what are you guys looking at? And it's like, you might not want to know.
Yeah.
So we kind of were like, oh, there's something up there, whatever. But like most people would understand, like, hey, is there a hunt going on? And would ask that question if they're okay with it. And then you hand over some glasses and say, look at this direction or whatever. But those gals, I think they understood. Yeah, maybe we'll move on. And and by the time Geff and his cousin and Tracy all crossed the river and came out, I mean, Geff was gray and salty and malnourished and probably 10 pounds lighter than he was when he went up the hill from not eating and not drinking and realizing that and so we bought waters, and this was a tip from Tracy. He goes, when we have people just come and volunteer and come and show up for these hunts, he goes, just fill a cooler, put some Cokes in, put some waters in, have some snacks. And so we kind of did our normal, what we would have bought for a 5-day hunt, of drinks and things to have in the back of the car for everybody once they got down. So I think when the boys got down, we made some like cold cheese sandwiches and had some Cokes on the side of the road, and had some celebration right there at there's the little pull off that we were all parked in, and got to have that, like he said, with his parents and his brother and friends and everybody that, had wanted to participate, and to not have wasted, like, some hunts go for 15 days and that happens, and that is, and then people lose interest and fall off, but to have this all happen in the span of like a 24-hour period was really a special thing.
It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. And I bet that cheese sandwich was the best thing Jeff's ever had.
That was pretty awesome.
Well, that's a great story. That's an amazing story.
Our one other
go ahead, Ali.
Yeah. Our one other aside that we did was we started we made summer sausage out of the bulk of him, and we went to the Bowhunter Association banquet and brought that to share with everybody. And then we sent about 100 rolls of summer sausage to Jeff's business in Alaska for the fishermen to eat. And at the end of the year, there were 3 or 4 rolls left over that the Hawaiians just loved. So this Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep traveled from here, went to Alaska, and then it was finally consumed on the beach of Kauai with a group of salmon fishermen that live in Hawaii.
That's amazing.
So
that's amazing.
Lots of travel on this guy.
That is such a cool story. I'm jealous. I hope to have that kind of like community on a hunt. I've been on some elk hunts, and like I said, it's private. You don't want people you don't want to burn any spots, all that kind of stuff. This last season, I probably had the best community I've ever had on a hunt. But there's nothing I think like those once in a lifetime hunts and the people that get involved. And hopefully I'm as lucky as you, Geff. I think I have 5-6 points at this point, so a couple more years and maybe I'll be there, but probably not. With my luck, it'll probably be. I think 2 years ago I had 95% chance of drawing an antelope tag. Didn't draw it.
Yeah.
So that's where I am with drawing tags. So I'll probably never get to hunt those. But
as we're talking right now, the hunt just opened on the 1st, and I got an update of the guys that are up, and we had last year
hunting this year.
Yeah, last year the other tag holder that went to the west side of the hill, that was kind of the other thing I was going to mention. He had the same luck that I did opening morning. And so
Good for him.
both of those rams we harvested opening morning. We're on to the 5th now. And from what I know, there's not been one taken just yet. But on the draw odds, I know that there's a young guy that's really happy up there. He's 16 years old with a sheep tag in his pocket. So he drew on his first year eligible for the hunt this year. And it's the other kind of neat thing is once you get involved in the hunt in these units like that, like you say, the community becomes, you're not trying to hide spots, secrets, anything like that. It becomes that this year you kind of get to know the guys that are doing the hunt, and you get to hear how it's going for them.
That's cool, man. I would love to talk to that kid's dad.
Right.
How fired up is that dad, or pissed? The dad's probably got 30 points and has never drawn. Both. His son draws at 3. Oh,
and we've met enough sheep hunters like that of the guys in Southern Colorado and the friends and all of that it's such a hard thing to draw, that these guys are in their 60s and 70s when they finally do. And then you're supposed to go to places that a sheep can go. And we, that was one of those of being like pretty thankful and lucky that he got this when he was young and healthy, and you're not worrying about knee replacements and hip replacements and all of those things when you have to go climb the side of a mountain. And so that was a pretty lucky thing too, because we've seen a lot of guys that it's like, what am I going to do here? Like I can't go across that canyon, and
especially with archery equipment, right? Like 700 yards, if that's the guesstimated distance. Rifle, that's doable. You can train for that. With archery, man, you got to just beat feet. You got to make it happen. So kudos to you, Geff, man. Yeah. That's awesome.
Pretty awesome.
It's going to be a tough one to match.
Uh-huh.
I bet. Now you got to get another archer. Have you gotten any archery kills since then?
I'm actually going to be going 15th of this month. I drew a deer license in a really neat unit, and so we've been putting some scouting time in, and a lot of good bucks that we've seen so far. And the rifle season's going to end on the 15th of December, so I'll have starting on the 16th to the end of the year to go try to find a nice buck.
That's awesome. That's cool.
We were lucky enough, we managed to get 2 elk to this year, and we had run out of elk burger in our freezer, so it was time.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let's jump into one of those stories. I don't know if you have other stories you wanted to tell, but like you guys obviously are pretty accomplished elk hunters. So any one of those stories you want to share?
I can turn the computer a little bit so you can see a couple of the elk on the wall.
Those are good elk. What the hell is that? Is that like a 14 point, or am I looking at multiple antlers?
You're looking at two elk side by side. One's a shoulder mount, and one is
Send me photos of that so I can share it on the Instagram.
Yes.
For a second, I was like, "Holy crap!" That's like a red stag for a second. I didn't know what was going on.
No, so that's also the funny thing is he got this sheep hunt, and then also happened to draw a Unit 20 elk tag last year. And so
how many elk points did you have? That's a 20-something point, right?
I think they take 6 or 7 points. I ended up spending 9 on it. But that's the late season starts beginning part of January.
Okay.
And so that was the question with the sheep tag in pocket of putting the time in to give both hunts their due, and considered turning in the elk license and just focusing on the one hunt. But I thought it'd be a really neat deal to put both of them together in the same unit in the same hunting season. And so I shot sheep on December 1st, and I ended up getting my bull on January 6th, I believe it was. So just more than a month apart, and as the crow flies, they were about 2.5 miles apart from each other of where I got them. So it ended up a lot to manage, but an awfully neat deal that when everybody gets back from the taxidermist, that they were same calendar year, same unit. Just a really neat kind of end to the hunting season last year.
And
That's awesome.
a funny thing with us is we met in 2010, and in 2012 Geff drew an elk license on the Bosque in southern Colorado, which was, at that point in time, it was a once in a lifetime hunt. And that was when, if anybody knows about that unit, is it was in about as prime of condition as it's ever been or gonna be. That it had been really well managed at that point. The neighboring ranches had been really well managed at that point. And so the opportunity for a massive bull down there was really high. And so he's telling me, I've got this once in a lifetime hunt. We're going to go down. We're going to scout it. We're going to do all of this. And then the next year, his dad draws a once in a lifetime hunt. And then the year after that, his brother draws the same Bosque once in a lifetime hunt. And I think in the past decade of us hunting together, it's been about 10 once in a lifetime hunts. And
oh my God.
and I think it's just, we look at them that way, of realizing, it's just a special opportunity of knowing, whether it's Steve spending his 20 preference points or your dad spending 20 preference points and getting a huge license, or just having an opportunity at a place that you're probably never going to get to go back to.
Yeah.
Some of
That's
that
pretty
stuff.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got into the point game so late that I'm like, I'm just happy to hunt.
Right.
Like, I spent my elk points this year and I got an elk. Like I couldn't be more ecstatic. It's not a crazy point unit. But yeah, man, that's awesome. I went from jealous to now hating you guys that you've been on 10 once in a lifetime hunts.
Well, and he says this to me. I stepped into this in the, after the 20 years of them putting in their time and figuring out the point system and figuring out the units and doing all of the hard work. And I'm like, what? It's not hard. You just put in, you get a license, you go and you shoot one bullet and you get an elk. And Jeff's like, that's not how it is, baby. Like, it's just that's not the way that it
I'm
works.
with Geff on this one.
I really kind of wish I had her perspective.
Yeah, man. I wish it had appeared that way for anyone around.
Like,
I've got my hunting buddy, his wife's like, so why do you go elk hunting? Like, you haven't killed anything ever. And I'm like, oh, sorry, bud. Like,
yeah.
So
I think the big thing is if you're out there in the wilderness just for the harvesting part, that's such a short span of it that, there's a whole lot more that goes into it. And I think, the fortunate end that you finally get to shoot, and be successful is just the icing on the cake. But yeah, 100%. I think it's awfully neat to be able to spend time out in the field with friends and family, and then every once in a while it comes together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and what's funny is I've heard obviously a lot of hunting stories over the last couple of years. The most memorable ones do not always involve a harvest, right? It's whether sometimes it's injuring an animal, which is never good, but a lot of times it has to do with the trials and tribulations getting to the point of actually getting to harvest something. So, I was telling someone the other day, like, if I had never killed an animal, but I'd been on all the hunts and they were all exactly what they are right now, but without harvesting anything, I'd still love every moment of it. It's
absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yeah. We've talked about that a lot, and there are times where we go elk hunting and in 6 days, you don't, like, that happened this year. We didn't see an elk for 6 days, and we ended up both harvesting and being lucky, but we spent 6 days not seeing an elk at all. And it was still a fun time. It was still a good hunt. We met other people that know Ted Nugent. He's the Kevin Bacon of the hunting world. He'd probably hate that.
7 degrees of Ted Nugent, right?
Yeah. We're pretty.
That's funny. Well, all right, guys. Well, we're a little off track. I love getting into this like sentimental and the zen of hunting, but we're here to hear hunting stories. Do you have any more? We've been here for an hour. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if you have more stories, I'd love to hear them.
Why don't you tell them about your deer hunt last year with your dad?
Yeah. So I got my once in a lifetime deer that is I drew on a hybrid tag in a unit that usually takes 18 to 20 preference points, I think. And I drew with 5
First year. Yep.
my first year on a hybrid.
You guys are ridiculous. Okay, keep
and
going.
so that was pretty lucky. And this was,
I have to talk to you guys once we turn the recording off how to put in for stuff.
right.
Apparently I don't know what I'm doing, so keep going.
And so this was like you've gotten to, I grew up in Boulder. I grew up golfing, and we didn't have guns in the house. I didn't grow up around hunters, and so my dad was not a hunter. He's a runner and a golfer. And I drew this license, and my dad's like, it works for me. I want to come watch you hunt. I want to come for, I've got 3 days. I can come hunt. So I said, that sounds awesome. Great. And so my dad shows up. We meet him down at the camper. We've got a nice little camper set up, and it's just the two of us and our black lab pup that was, I don't know, he was only a year old at the time. And my dad, and we showed up a day before season, and this was the same area that Geff, his brother, and his dad had all harvested good bucks out of that same area. And so we had a good idea of where to go, where we wanted to start, which area we wanted to end up in. And it just so happened that exactly where we wanted to go and where we'd been scouting, the wind was exactly wrong the first 2 days of season.
Okay.
So we go down.
That sounds about right. Now we're back on track with normal hunting problems.
So so it's like the wind is blowing out of the west. It needed to be blowing out of the east, or we're gonna blow the entire canyon out and ruin everything. So we spent the first day, we went and hunted a different section, didn't see anything. We went and did that same thing the second day, and same thing, didn't see anything, but we knew this one area was a spot. And so we had to wait till the third day of season to go in there in the morning. And meanwhile, my dad, who's like ADD, hyperactive, like total Boulder, Colorado runner, marathoner guy, is like, I'm bored. What are we doing? Why aren't we hunting? This is boring. I don't know why am I here? I think I'm going to leave today. And so it was just kind of a funny thing of like, once you've spent time learning hunting and all of that it's like, this is a different thing, and you have to have a good level of patience. Even though we're not tree stand whitetail hunters that sit for hours and hours and hours being quiet. We move a lot, and we seek out the animal a lot. But even at that, my dad was just restless, and so it was like almost pressure to have the wind to do the right thing, because that was the thing that was holding us up. But so the third morning, we had the right wind, and so we got up and got to the cliff right at sunrise, and it's December 3rd or 4th. 3rd. And so the deer are rutting pretty good, but they were, they're just kind of starting to come out of the rut. But we see this deer, and we had an idea, kind of same thing. We had an idea of two in particular that we were looking for. And one was a big, wide mule deer that was a little less heavy. And then there was this other one that was a lot narrower, but he had really heavy brow tines. And we had seen him and scouted him and knew that both of those good deer lived right in this area. And so we get in the morning, and we're looking, and all we see are does, and all we see are these does just feeding, just being doe deer in the morning. And I think we sat and watched them for an hour. And it was like we were about to get up to leave, and the sun was just hitting us right where you could hardly see. And all of a sudden, this buck comes out from around the corner, and it was the heavy, more narrow buck. And it was just like, not only was he there and we found him when we saw him, we know how to get to him, and he's still following these two does as hard as a buck does in the rut. Just he's licking and sniffing and following these two girls as close as he can.
He's
and so it's
a
just
good,
like
inappropriate time.
Yes, exactly. And he, I mean, I think we probably could have walked right up to him and he probably would have been like, I'm busy. And so we did that. We kind of moved around to where we needed to get down off of the ravine, and where we're at is rocky and cactusy, and we're both in our our nice hunting boots and leather and that, and my dad's in trail running sneakers, so he's getting feet filled with cactus.
Or mid early December. He's in
in mid to early December, and he's just like, no, these will do. These are fine. And so he's getting cactus in his toes and having to look and all of this, and mind you, like, this is a fit 70-year-old guy that still runs I don't know, 20-25 miles a week, and Ooh. And so to have him trailing behind us because we had the better shoes, and we were more used to hiking terrain. Yeah, just doing that. And so that was kind of an achievement in itself. But we got to the deer, and he was just climbing up of a finger of a part of the canyon, following those two does hard, and he was was he 200 to 205?
205 when we first ranged him, and once they jumped up over the top of the rim, what was he, 306? I think is what I called when you shot.
Yep. And so I was shooting and I have an .6 that I shoot, and shooting from the bottom of the canyon, not far elevation wise up, and shot him, and he just crumpled, and those two does just took off up the hill and weren't any the wiser, and he just laid down. And it was unbelievable, and it was one of those things that it was like the joy of having a successful shot and having a successful hunt, and then having my dad, who is not a hunter, who's never been with us on this, be there with us.
Yeah.
And he was just like beside himself, jumping up and down. He goes, this is the most proud I've ever been of you. This is better than the day you were born. Like, all of this. And so it was just fantastic. And then Geff and I climbed up the hill, and, we had our packs and everything ready to go. And this was December of 21. It was a hot December. And so we shot at 8-9 in the morning, and it was supposed to get to 75 degrees. And so we had to hurry and get the deer processed and get him off of the hill. And so Geff and I climbed that hill, and my dad was 10 minutes behind us, hiking up behind us. And that was a good feeling of like the only time I've ever beaten my dad at an athletic type. And he's never processed an animal or anything. And so he got to see all of that too, of us caping him and pulling him apart. And I think Dad carried the back straps and the loins down the hill, and it was pretty, it was just pretty a spectacular, lucky hunt. But just something completely different than I ever got to experience before.
I bet, especially with a crazy boulder person with you. That's awesome. Yeah, right. Did he, or has he expressed any interest in going back out as a sidekick again, or has he tried to maybe go get his own points and go out on his own?
He is 1 year too young to not have to do a hunter's safety, so he hasn't done a hunter's safety still.
He's just waiting it out.
Just wait. Yeah. Waiting it out. And so he's expressed a more interest in going duck or goose hunting than he has coming back big game hunting. I think that there's that with the people that are, it's kind of the difference between a fly fisherman and a walleye fisherman. There are people that are big game hunters and there are people that aren't. The learning about the patience and the time and the nuances of it, I think that was one that he was kind of like, I don't know that that's for me.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be interested in sitting in a duck blind and having a lot of action over a day. So
he's like, I'll wait, shoot some ducks, and then I'll go run around the reservoir with my my trail runners.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Oh man. Well, that's another great story. I wish I could get my dad to hunt with me. I don't think he's ever really gonna make it out. He's not that tight. He's not a runner. He played volleyball. You may or may not know that, knowing that you know my mom. But yeah, no, he's not really an outdoors kind of guy. So I don't know if I'll ever get to share that same fun experience. But that's cool. That is very cool. And hopefully he goes out and who knows, maybe once he harvests his own big game, he'll become addicted like the rest of us.
Right. And Jeff's dad is looking at getting another elk, he thinks, this coming season. So he expressed interest for the first time in 4 or 5 years. So
I think we'll get him back in the field again. I hunted with him since I was 12, and he's getting older and kind of thinking that he was done with it. And then this year he says, I think I'm going to show up to elk camp this year. So that'll be a really neat deal if he does come back and join again.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. We'll have to catch up with you guys after next season and see how that goes.
Absolutely.
And then hopefully I've talked to you since then and I've drawn all of my lifetime tags and
right?
I have some good stories to share too.
Get the good juju.
Right. Well, cool guys. Well, any other stories you want to share tonight? Otherwise I've taken up plenty of your time. You tell me.
I think that's all we thought of before we called. So
okay. Perfect, guys. Well, thank you. I really appreciate, I don't know why you were talking to my mom, Ali, but thank you for doing it, and thank you for connecting with me. It was great to hear your stories, Jeff's stories. I don't know if you want to share where the people can find you or not.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I only Facebook. I'm that's about the only place I'm locatable online. So
okay. Well, then walk off into the sunset. I'll send me some photos so people know at least what you look like. But thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to hear your stories. I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but I think I'm moving back to Colorado here in the next 2 months. So I'll buy you guys dinner sometime when I get back there because I don't live too far from Loveland. So
good.
Sounds great.
All right, guys. Well, thank you.
Look forward to it.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you both. And
yes.
We're having you back next season. I want to hear how Dad does.
Good deal. Well, thanks for having us.
Of course.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Ali and Jeff, of course, for coming on the podcast. Could not have done this without them. Thank you guys, of course, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed their stories as much as I enjoyed their stories, and hopefully we get some more from them here in the future. But yeah, guys, that's it. Please make sure to go and follow me on Instagram or the Hunting Stories _official. Ali and Jeff don't have any social medias, so I won't guide you directly to them. But please do follow us. Share the podcast with at least one other person so that we can make sure to keep this thing growing and get more listeners reaching out with more crazy stories. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Now, of course, get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.